when you deal with a civilization that is traveling from another star system that may be thousands of light years or millions of light years from Earth, and all of a sudden they're in Earth's atmosphere or in our solar system or in a field, and there's a spacecraft there, those craft and those occupants have a full understanding of a type of cosmology that goes way beyond current materialistic reductionist science and crosses from that and bridges from that over into this ancient Vedic knowledge of the science of consciousness and the transdimensional reality and the types of energy forms that matter can take under certain conditions. And this is precisely what people describe. If you look at the UFO, so-called UFO literature, and by the way, I just want to point out that UFO is a term coined by the intelligence community after they knew that they were neither unidentified nor did they fly. But that's another discussion about how a lexicon is created to control the mind and also to control the consciousness. But for convention, just to say, if you look at the literature on UFO encounters and sightings, you'll see that virtually all of the things that you would read in, say, the Vedic literature, these craft do. They move straight through solid mountains. They go straight into the earth, even though they look like they would disintegrate and have a crash as they go into the earth. They have an interface with consciousness. They can bilocate. They can change form and kind of go through a morphing process. There have been many experiences where the same identical craft and beings have appeared in more than one place at the same time. In fact, we have a member of our team years ago. There was a very well-known actor and singer, Burl Ives, who had his wife had an experience where during the Northridge earthquake, as she was up in Anacortes, Washington, but she came downstairs early one morning, the day of that earthquake, and there was after I had introduced her to the ideas of contact and how to make contact, and she had started practicing the CSETI protocols that we're going to be teaching people at the conference in Rio Rico in October next month. What she found was that she started having these sightings, and these ET craft started appearing around her home there in Anacortes, Washington. Well, one morning when she came downstairs, there was a craft hovering right above her courtyard, fully materialized, at least appeared to be fully materialized, very visible with the naked eye, with a beam of light streaming into her foyer. And the extraterrestrials on board were saying, "Do not be afraid. We are always with you. You will be protected." At that instant, she just knew intuitively, psychically, somehow, she should call her best friend in L.A. And when she picked up the phone and called her, that person, a woman that she was very close with, was in the middle of the Northridge earthquake. And the identical spacecraft, absolutely identical, was outside her house with a stream of light coming into her window with the exact same thought and the exact same message coming into her mind that she should not be afraid, that they are always with us, and that she would be protected. And this happened as a way of showing to Dorothy Ives, Burl Ives' wife, that in fact these civilizations not only are very connected in consciousness and are here to very much to help and to protect Earth and her people, but also this amazing ability to literally bilocate for this exact same event to be happening at two places 1,000 miles apart between northern Washington State and Southern California at the exact same instant is the kind of thing that would seem confusing to a physicist at MIT, to say the least. But it isn't confusing to someone who has studied the Vedas. It isn't confusing to someone who studied the science of consciousness. And it isn't confusing to someone who understands the cosmology that extraterrestrial civilizations are utilizing in order to move between star systems or galaxies. And that's really what we want to focus on today.
And, you know, one of the most astonishing things I ever saw in this realm was my very first training in Joshua Tree in 1996 when we were driving out of the park finished for the evening pretty much, and that huge craft that was the size of your fist at arm's length zoomed down from the sky and merged directly into the desert floor.
Oh, yes, and it lit up the entire national park.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just incredible, and it was materialized, and yet it merged into the ground, and I mean, that made a big impression, my very first training.
Well, I think this is the kind of thing that we continue to experience every expedition we go on in one way or another. Right. But what Linda's describing was a very sort of a seminal event that happened in November of or the fall of '96, and actually it happened where this craft went into the national park is precisely where we'll be doing our contact work in November in a couple of months in Joshua Tree National Park on the 1 week training that we do for ambassadors to the universe. And those of you who are so inclined are welcome to come to that, and you can find out more about that at cseti.org, cseti.org. And one of the things that was very interesting about that experience, sort of a prelude to it, is that I had been given a mental message just before this happened. We were at another site, and I was told that they weren't going to come right then and there, but they were going to be later. And I knew that we should move from that site, and so we were leaving the original site where we were located, and we were in our vehicles transporting back up towards the site that we now use. And just before this enormous, and it had to be several hundred feet in diameter, spacecraft that was shaped like a Hershey's Kiss, if you can visualize, flat on the bottom, and then it came up to sort of a top. And when it descended, it wasn't coming down at an angle. It appeared right over in the zenith of the sky, came straight down like a rock. And it was a beautiful teal blue color. And as it approached the Earth, of course, one was thinking that it would either have to stop or there'd be an enormous explosion or crash. But it didn't. It simply merged into the Earth. And they were showing us an underground facility that the extraterrestrial civilizations utilize, or an area they utilize, that's in a protected area of this vast national park up above Palm Springs and in the high desert east of Los Angeles. So, interestingly, when this happened, I knew that that's what they were showing me, and that's why we've continued to do our contact work at this site ever since. But one of the things that happened just before it materialized is that there was an energy wave that came into my car, because I was sort of the leader of this group, and that was not visible, but that was electromagnetic, and all of the dashboard lights on the car, like for the radio and because it was at night, it was very late. I forget what time, 12.
About 1:30.
What time was it, Linda?
1:30.
It was about 1:30, so yeah, it was quite late. And as that happened, all of my dashboard lights dimmed down and then came back up. And Sherry Adamak was in the front seat, and one of my daughters was in the back seat. And I turned to them and I said, "They're coming." I knew what that meant. And at that, about 2 seconds later, the spacecraft materialized in the atmosphere and went straight into the Earth at just breathtaking speed. Now, one of the things that, of course, is very confusing for people is that, well, what kind of energy form was this spacecraft in? It was visible to everyone. I mean, there were about 15, 16, 17 people who were there who saw this. But what kind of form would it be? Well, of course, if it had been conventionally materialized, like we think of a 747, it simply would have slammed into the rocks of the Earth and crashed. It didn't. So it was in a form that was almost like a plasma-like energy, or a brilliantly lit light craft that had shape and form, but obviously it was the matter of the spacecraft, the actual physical matter, was resonating at a frequency and at a resonant field that was faster than that of solid matter, so that it was able to go straight through solid matter without being injured. And this has been reported, by the way, in the UFO research literature for dozens of years. and perhaps even in ancient times, such mysterious things have been done. And a lot of times people have not understood how this would be possible. Is it an apparition? Is it possible? And the answer to that is yes, it is. And now we even understand scientifically how this has happened. But it isn't by staying in linear three-dimensional space-time speed, and that the speed of light and the speed of the electrons of matter are simply way too slow for any civilization to have that as their operating paradigm and then travel between star systems. Because if you were to stay in that phase of energy, say 186,000 miles per second, which is the speed of light, you couldn't go from one star system to another that's a million light years away. If a star system, let's say the Andromeda galaxy, is 2.5 million light years away, and you're from one of the stars in that galaxy, which is very similar to the Milky Way galaxy, well, if you were traveling even at the speed of light, it would take you 2.5 million years to get here and 2.5 million years to get home. That's 5 million years. So clearly we're dealing with an understanding of science and technology that goes beyond what I have termed the crossing point of light. And when you go beyond the crossing point of light, the frequency and speed of light, you have entered into a realm that is this transdimensional aspect of reality that crosses over into what the mystics and the ancients used to call the astral and etheric energies and things of this sort. And yet it's technological and it is scientific. And so that's what we're dealing with these extraterrestrial civilizations and how they appear around us. And that's why, as Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the astronomer, the astrophysicist who used to work for the Air Force and who was doing all the cover-up work for the Project Blue Book, who later came clean and admitted that they had been covering these things up and admitted that we were being visited by extraterrestrial civilizations. He called this all high strangeness, and he termed it that because from his paradigm of Earth, 20th century, early 21st century astrophysics and things of this sort, it's just very strange. And yet I tell people, is it really that strange? And this is where I want to sort of deconstruct that and analyze that for a minute. Because one of the things that I think is very important for people to understand is that all of this is very exotic if you objectify it too far. And you say, well, it's some unapproachable, non-understandable phenomenon.